What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Polygon Academy. My name is Tim, and welcome to episode 2 of the Gamedev Q&A series. Last week we had a big focus on environment art related questions, and this week we're going to be catching up on the rest of the questions that kind of flooded in from that tweet that I put out when I asked if anyone had any questions about the industry in general. So this week we're focusing on the high-level industry questions that should hopefully help a lot of you navigate your way into the industry, either as a student or those people maybe that are self-taught like me looking to get into the industry and get their first game art job. So before we get started, don't forget to smash that like button. It really does help people see these videos as YouTube recommends it to people. But let's just dive right into it. So this first question comes from John Emerson on Twitter. He says, how do you handle the high mobility between studios and cities the industry has and encourages in young or newer workers? Would you like to see growth of game dev outside the major hubs, for example, the Midwest, Plains, flyover states? If so, what might that look like to you? This is a really good question, John, because I think there is a very common perception that the game industry is in constant chaos. There's studios closing down. You might get your first game art job, but then a year later the studio might shut down or the team might have huge layoffs, and you'll have to pack up your bags and move across country. And while this can be the case, I definitely think it is kind of an overblown thing that it dominates the front page of IGN and Kotaku all the time anytime there's a round of layoffs, because those kind of articles are sensationalist and they generate clicks, and people like to get in on the comments and hate on game dev and say, oh, the industry's collapsing, it's so bad. And while it definitely can happen to you, and it has happened to me in the past, I'll actually go into that in a little bit. I don't think it's as common as you think. A lot of the people in the industry that I've worked with, they'll work at a studio for 2, 3, 4 years and then voluntarily move on to a new studio, usually just because they want a different change of environment, or another project is more appealing to them. But I would say 80% of the time it's going to be more of a voluntary choice to move around, rather than you're just going to, your world is going to collapse and you're going to have to pack your bags and move to another country or move across the United States or something like that. So for me, in my experience, what happened is I was living and working in Vancouver for the first half of my career. And during, around 2010, 2011, the industry in Vancouver was slowly, it seemed to be collapsing as more and more studios were closing down. I was working for actually Relic at the time, and THQ's stock price was steadily going on the decline. And people were starting to get a little bit nervous. And, is the project going to be around in a year from now or something like that? And so when a recruiter from Ubisoft Montreal reached out to me, I could kind of read the tea leaves and see what was coming on the horizon, because I had seen all these articles about studios opening up in Montreal. Montreal seemed to be booming for the game industry, while Vancouver seemed to be slowly dying. So I decided, everything in my life at the time, there was no real ties to Vancouver aside from my family being there, and I figured, well, I can fly back and visit them at any time. So I decided to take the jump, and I basically packed up all my stuff with the help of Ubisoft. They have someone that, usually when you get a job at a new studio, if they're anything but the smallest of studios, there usually is a bit of a budget for relocation. So that kind of takes some of the burden off of you. They hired someone to help, take me around town, get all set up with the Quebec medical plan and stuff like that, as well as help me find actually an apartment to rent. And my first month on the job, they actually rented me an apartment that helped ease some of that pressure, so I wasn't having to freak out and find an apartment in a week or something like that. So usually studios, if you are relocating, they will go out of their way to make your life a lot easier, because it's in their best interest for you to not be stressed, and you're gonna do a better job and get more into the work if you're comfortable right off the bat. So I would say there are definite game dev hubs around the world. So Montreal is probably one of the biggest. There's a lot of studios down in LA and California. And that's for a reason, because I know definitely in Montreal there are a lot of government subsidies, so it's a lot more attractive for studios to actually open up, and it kind of creates this pool of talent, and that's why these hubs kind of form. Usually because it attracts a lot of talent to one location, and then over the years maybe some people leave Ubisoft or EA, some of the larger studios, and form their own studios, and kind of recreate this cycle of growth and expansion. And then hopefully those studios succeed over time, and then people will probably leave those studios and create their own. So it just kind of creates this big hub of game development. And that actually is a good thing, because say there is a round of layoffs at one studio, say Ubisoft has some layoffs or EA has some layoffs or something like that. Because there's so many studios in town, we have Warner Bros, Ubisoft, Eidos, Behavior, the list goes on and on. Usually those other studios around town, if there is a big round of layoffs, they're eager to snap up some really good talent, because they know a bunch of people are looking for jobs, and it's going to be a good opportunity for them to make some quality hires and additions to their team. As well as, throughout just over the years, people are constantly flowing in between studios as people, quit their job at one place and go to another place. So I would say one of the benefits of being in a game dev hub is if something does go wrong, the chances of you landing on your feet, it's a little bit of an easier process because chances are there's going to be other studios in town that are hiring versus somewhere like in, a one town that has like one studio. Like maybe, like you said, in the Midwest or flyover states, it becomes a lot more risky because if that one studio closes, then you're probably gonna have to relocate. But in my opinion, actually, if you're looking to break into the industry, taking the opportunity to relocate and maybe even go work abroad, as scary as it might sound, could be one of the best experiences of your life. I know for me, relocating from Vancouver to Montreal, it was a scary prospect at first, but I really enjoy my life here in Montreal now, and it's one of the best things I've ever done. And if you're young and just getting out of school, you're probably young and a student, I would say always take the opportunity to travel whenever you can, because it's only going to make you a more interesting person, a more well-rounded person if you go and spend some time in another country, like immersing yourself in a completely different culture. It might seem absolutely terrifying, but I don't think there are many people that have done it and regretted it, especially while they're young and don't have many ties. They probably don't have, they're not married or they don't have kids or whatever. So take those opportunities and just take the leap, and I can almost guarantee you'll probably really enjoy it. As well as your question of would I like to see development of those areas without a game dev hub? Would I like to see studios popping up around there? I mean, of course, more game studios is never a bad thing, but I think actually on the flip side, what you'll start to see is a rise in remote work opportunities. Not necessarily freelance opportunities, but where you can actually work for a big studio as an employee, but work remotely. Over the next 5 to 10 years, I think the whole digital nomad or remote location-independent worker concept will become more and more commonplace as it becomes an appealing lifestyle to more people. And if a lot of big studios want to keep and maintain some really good talent that is around the world, it might be an option for them to hire someone just to work remotely, because maybe that person doesn't want to commute every day or something like that. And as the internet and 5G comes along, it's only making it less and less of a need to actually be in a physical space together, as you can have VoIP meetings, you can work remotely on a remote desktop. There's not really a huge reason to be as a huge group. It is nice to have that collaborative environment, but a lot of that can be accomplished digitally, especially as technology evolves, and there's just going to be not that much need for people to be in an office. And you're actually starting to see a lot of people that splinter off from larger studios creating their own game studios where the entire team is almost remote around the world, and they just are still able to work together on a project. And it keeps the cost for the studio down because they don't have to have a massive studio space, and they don't have to buy PCs for everyone. So that only makes it more of a win-win situation, I think. And like I said, over the next 5 to 10 years, it's not super common right now, but it'll only become more common as it makes life easier for a lot of people. And it's just going to be a more and more attractive option that companies can use to get and retain top-tier talent. So this next question comes from Brian Pitt. He says, "Hey Tim, I'd love to know more about how to target a specific studio for a portfolio. How do you make work that will appeal to them without crossing the line into fan art? Also, should you be able to demonstrate multiple styles to be appealing to multiple places? Thanks." Good question, Brian. Actually, I don't think there is anything wrong with fan art. To be honest, if I was working at a studio and we were in the middle of production and we're looking to hire someone, the closer their work is to what we're actually making, the easier it is and a no-brainer it is to hire that person. So if you really want to work at say, I don't know, maybe Naughty Dog or something like that, or Ubisoft, take one of their concepts that's on ArtStation from one of their concept artists and try and recreate that. If you can create that to a high level that matches the quality that's already in their last shipped game, then it's almost a no-brainer for them to hire you, because it shows that you're super passionate about their subject matter. You can match their art style, and even if it is a fan art, that's not necessarily a bad thing. I don't know why it has such a bad rap, or people think it's a bad rap. It's the only downside to doing that is any of the flaws are going to become readily apparent, because they're so used to looking at their work all day. And say you do an Uncharted scene or something like that. If your vegetation isn't really good, that's going to stand out to them. And but if you want to get that job at that studio, you're going to need to develop those skills. So you're going to need to be able to do good vegetation, good ruins and stuff like that in order to get the job anyways. So it doesn't really matter if the flaws are apparent, because then you're clearly not ready for that job at that studio. So I would just yeah, there's no really downside to doing it other than, it's going to make you have to really attempt to hit their level of quality. And that's only going to be a good thing if you can actually manage to do it. It's going to make it, yeah, you're just going to be like a really no-brainer hire, because they're in the middle of production. They don't want to look at a bunch of people with like sci-fi hallways and be like, is this a person that they could be clearly a good artist, but can they do the stuff that's relevant to the game we're making? So the more like less, the less questions you have unanswered, the better, because then they can just look at your portfolio and clearly put it next to what they're making and be like, looks like a match, like we should get this person in for an interview probably, rather than having to guess, well, this guy's color and composition is really good, but like it's all technical like sci-fi panel work and we're making like a game set in the 1200 AD or something like that. So context is super important, and that actually ties into the second part of your question. So I see a lot of people asking, should I have a large variety of art styles in my portfolio? And I would say as a student, probably not, because the people that I see that in their portfolio, it's usually like they'll have like a stylized prop, maybe a stylized scene, a photoreal scene, and none of it's hitting the level of quality that if they had gone all in on one thing. Like someone that goes all in on doing stylized work and has a portfolio full of stylized work is usually a lot better at it than someone that has like kind of sampled all these different things and then that's their portfolio. So I think it's a very common mistake trying to think, I need to have a portfolio that appeals to a really wide range because that'll help me get a job quicker. Whereas actually I think you could be sabotaging yourself because you're not getting super good at one style. So I would say, again, target studios that you really want to work at, look at their art style and just go all in that and try and get to the highest level of quality as possible. Now, some senior portfolios, they will have a wider range of art styles because, I mean, if someone's working for a long time, chances are they're going to get bored of, once they've kind of mastered maybe photoreal work, yeah, maybe they want to do some stylized work. And usually the portfolios that I see that have a bit of a range to that, it's from more senior artists that have been doing game art for, 10, 15 years. So they kind of like open up that gamut and are able to master and tackle both. But as a student, I would say get really focused and try and just master one skill set but at first it's always good to taste, like I always say, taste everything. So as a student, your first pieces that you're producing in either art style probably aren't going to be like your final portfolio ready. So I would say try your hand at both and see what you actually enjoy doing, because I think maybe a lot of people that don't have any experience creating art for games, maybe they just signed up for a game design and game art program. They had this really romantic idea of, oh, I want to work at Blizzard, so I'm going to go and create a bunch of stylized art, but they actually don't enjoy the process of doing that and maybe surprise themselves with like actually doing photoreal art. So I would say taste both, and then once you figure out what you actually enjoy doing, go all in that. Because I mean, I know for me, if I was sitting there creating stylized textures for 40 hours a week, I wouldn't really enjoy my life. I enjoy the more photoreal, hyperreals kind of games and that style of art. So that's basically what I focus all my time on doing, because I don't really have an interest. Even though Blizzard is probably an awesome place to work, it's not somewhere where I would really want to like go and work on like World of Warcraft or something like that, just because I enjoy doing a different style of art. So I would say figure out what you enjoy the most, target a studio that has an art style that aligns with the kind of stuff you enjoy making, and then just go all in on that. But don't be afraid to dabble and taste both if you don't have a lot of experience in that field. So this next question comes from James Ward on Twitter. He says, would you say it's more important to have a portfolio of environments that are built to be game-ready specs or are built to be purely art? How do you find the middle ground personally? Good question, James. I think, to be honest, if you're going to be working in the game industry, you should be making game art quality, like game spec work. Because, I mean, it shows your relevance to the job that someone's going to hire you to do. Like having a bunch of fancy renders in your portfolio that are like, this took 20 hours to render in V-Ray. Like, that's great. They can look really cool, but it's not really relevant to the job that people are looking to pay you to do. So I know for me, like, usually when I see a portfolio for, say, an environment artist or a prop artist, I only look at their game spec stuff because that's what we're going to be like looking to hire them to do. I might glance at their rendered stuff and say, okay, obviously this person has an eye for composition and color. But the thing that's really going to be, telling me should we bring this person in for an interview is their game spec level work, because you need to be able to create things that are going to run in engine. And actually, I have worked with people that have transitioned from the film industry to the game industry, and a lot of them always tell me that they had a bit of a learning curve at first because they used to, be creating super high polygon models, and that, they're like, what, we can't use like 32 8K maps on this one mech? I have to do it all on like a 2048? Like, it blows their mind that, the specs for games and film are so completely different. So sometimes there is a bit of a learning curve for them, and then they finally kind of figure out what works with. So they have the artistic side of their skills developed, but the technical side isn't there, and that can sometimes hurt them. So if a studio is looking to hire someone in the heat of crunch or in the middle of production, they want that ramp up time to be as low as possible. So if all your work is already, shown in like Unreal or Unity in a game engine, it's just like this person clearly knows how to make real-time materials, deal with real-time lightings, the limitations of using maybe light maps and stuff like that. So it only like makes you more relevant to the job that you're looking to get into. So personally, I know for me, everything I do is always game spec. I only work in like Unreal. I'd like to learn a bit of Unity, but like everything that I do is completely relevant to the game industry because I decided long ago like that's my career path that I'm going to follow. So everything that I do, all my actions map to that, and it just makes me more relevant to jobs that I would apply for. This next question comes from Claire Monahan on Twitter. She says, "A lot of my questions have already been asked, so how do you network at student events? It scares me. And what kind of portfolio pieces are best to focus on for breaking into the industry? Larger environment, smaller dioramas, etc., etc." So this is a super good question because I know for me as a bit more of an introverted person, back in the day when I was younger, there were local, SIGGRAPH events in Vancouver. So they would have like the making of Jurassic Park or the visual effects of Star Wars breakdowns and stuff like that. And these can be great opportunities to go and mix and mingle with a bunch of like-minded individuals, some that are in the industry, others that'll be students looking for information and stuff like that you can make contacts with. And I would say that would be my first point of advice is that you have to go there, and this will help take away some of the fear, is realize that all these people are like-minded individuals that are passionate about usually the same stuff that you are. So if it's an event like GDC or E3, everyone there is probably really into playing video games, making games. They specifically go there to share techniques and give advice to maybe students or other people that are like hungry and eager to learn. So the second piece of advice I would give you is maybe grab a fellow classmate and say, hey, I'm going to go to GDC. Do you want to come with me? Because that way you'll always have someone to talk to, and you'll kind of have a home base to return to. If you go to a presentation, you chat with someone, that kind of wraps up, and then you're not just by yourself and oh, I'm by myself in the corner. And you might think that that's weird, but you can totally rock out to those events solo. It does take a bit of guts, especially if you're more of like on the introverted side of things like me. But after a while, you kind of get immune to it. But it's just literally realize that everyone there's there for a reason, to network, to share information, to make new friends. So just go and maybe, grab a friend and then just go and try and have the best time possible because you'll probably learn a lot. Those presentations and stuff like that have great Q&A sessions usually, so that's a good opportunity to ask any questions you might have. But there is another big piece of advice I would give you too. So if you're at like a cocktail mixer before or after a presentation or something like that, you have to be careful about how you go and like maybe shove your portfolio into people's faces, because I know your first instinct is probably going to be like, oh, I'm going to find someone here that's going to give me the inside track and get me a job. If only I can get them to see my portfolio. And that's great, and there are opportunities for that. But a lot of the time, people can tell when you're trying to get something from them, and it makes it a little off-putting and not super attractive. So what I would say is you have to kind of gauge the social situation. A lot of the times, those kind of mixers are a great place to just chat about, video games or industry stuff like that. And then maybe, you meet another, say if you're an environment artist, you meet an environment artist from another studio. You can be like, ask them some questions about, oh, how did you guys do this sequence in this, how did you guys do this sequence in this game? And maybe they'll be able to share some info with you, and you can say, oh, I'm training to be an environment artist. I'm actually working on a scene that's inspired by this, blah, blah, blah. And then they'll probably even ask you, oh, really cool. Do you have any work in progress screenshots? And that's the situation where I, pull out the phone, show them your latest work in progress. This is why it's good to have your offline ArtStation synced as well onto your phone or your tablet or whatever, because then you can just pull it out. It doesn't matter if you have Wi-Fi. You might be in the middle of nowhere in like a really cool underground after party or something like that. Who knows? But I wouldn't try and rely on your cell signal or Wi-Fi. That's a tip. Use the offline ArtStation, or just save the photos and screenshots locally on your phone. So sometimes you kind of have to, finesse that, and maybe they'll want to take a look at your portfolio. If it doesn't naturally come up in conversation, I would say maybe after the event, definitely hit them up on ArtStation or LinkedIn and just send them a little DM being like, oh, hey, it's me. Remember we talked about, Metal Gear Solid for 20 minutes. By the way, I'm an environment artist. Would you mind taking a look at my portfolio and maybe give me a little bit of feedback? Thanks. It was so nice meeting you. Something like that. because then you're kind of like, you're not trying to just sit there in a conversation and be like, take a look at my portfolio, and they're going to be like, okay. And maybe don't ask for referrals because that person probably doesn't know you. Like for me, I usually only give referrals to HR for people that I've actually worked with extensively in the past, because when they ask, is this person good, blah, 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 I can tell them a bit more about their personality, how they work on the team and stuff like that. So asking for a referral kind of puts that person that works at a studio in a bit of an awkward situation, because like maybe they're looking at your work and they don't think it's good enough and they don't want to just tell you that to your face. So I would just kind of like try and build a relationship with that person over time. Now, on the flip side, at events like GDC, there are dedicated portfolio review sessions. And in these cases, definitely rock up and get your portfolio in their face as quick as possible, because A, there's probably a big lineup of people that are waiting to do the same thing, and this person's time is valuable. So that's why I said, have the offline version of your portfolio synced, have a backup of all the screenshots actually saved to like your photos folder on your phone. And that way you're not sitting there, you don't rock up to the person and be like, okay, here, let me just load my portfolio. It takes 2 or 3 minutes to load up. You have to join the local Wi-Fi and all that stuff. If that happens, 10, 20, 30 times a day, that's like hours of that person's time being wasted. So just think ahead, and then, just plan your strategy. So you're going to get some advice on your portfolio probably. And that's also another opportunity to say, like, oh, cool, I'll implement that feedback and advice. And then do you mind if I send you a message on ArtStation or LinkedIn to show you the updates that I've done? And of course, follow through on those updates if they give you a bunch of advice, because that shows you take action on critiques. And that shows that you're willing to actually, have a critical eye to look at your work, and you're not just gonna, take advice and then kind of throw it off in the garbage. Because that person has taken time out of their day to give you some feedback that you hopefully can improve your work. So actually use it to improve your work. But last piece of advice, just like I said, just go and have like the best time you can. Learn as much as you can, and it might seem scary at first, but don't look at people that they're there like, oh, they're these industry gods, and I'm like this little student that they're not gonna wanna talk to me or value my opinion. We absolutely go to events like this to mix and mingle with students, fellow industry folk, and everyone's just there to learn and have a good time. So use that kind of mindset and to put that maybe your own discomfort on the back seat, and have the objective of like, this is really going to help me in my career. As well as, if you're in a team at a game studio, you're going to have to get used to being in social situations like this. Maybe like once or twice a week, you're probably going to have to interact with people you don't even know. So developing those social skills will only help you be more comfortable in a studio environment as well. So this one comes from Sarah White on Twitter. She says, this one is more of a personal one than an arty one, but how do you deal with friends and family, particularly older relatives who don't understand that game art is a real job? Does it ever make you have doubts about what you're doing despite loving what you do? And I think that last part of that sentence is the most key component of this question. If you love what you're doing and it's what you're passionate about, don't feel the need to apologize or explain to anyone. I know for me, I was really lucky that my parents were never putting pressure on me to like, oh, you have to go to school and get like a real job, like become a doctor or a lawyer, or you're not going to be successful. I know in various parts of the world, there is still that kind of culture and that mindset of, you have to go to university, you have to go to college, you have to get a serious job, otherwise you're going to be a failure in life. And I would say if you don't actually enjoy what you're doing, then that's a bigger like sense of failure than, if you're stuck being an accountant, but you really enjoy making video game art, then I would say, yeah, go for the video game art. Like even if your parents are pushing you or your older relatives are pushing you towards that, because back in the day to them, that was a really good career, is, to be honest, technology has advanced so rapidly that a lot of those people's kind of mindsets are really outdated, and trying to change them is only going to be like a big burden on you, because most people are really set in their ways. So sometimes it means having a hard conversation with someone and saying, oh, this is really what I'm passionate about, and this is what makes me happy, and I'm going to pursue it. And once you become 18 or whatever, you can move out, and that's kind of like what I did. I didn't do it because my parents weren't supporting me. I just wanted that independence and freedom. But sometimes if your parents are really, maybe really against you getting into the game industry, or they think that's not a valid career choice, it might be a hard choice, but you might have to say, you know what, I'm going to move out on my own. I'm going to pursue my dreams, and I hope that you learn to support me one day. But I find most of the time, once you actually start to gain some traction, I know for me, when I got my first junior game art job, my parents went from being like, oh, okay, obviously it seems like a good career to get in the game industry, and I got my first junior game art job, and I told them what the starting salary was. They were like, holy smokes, that is like, pretty much on par with what we've been making during our own career for like the last 20 years. So, I mean, it is definitely a very lucrative industry to get into, but the most important part is if it's something you're passionate about, you can kind of have to be unapologetic about that, and eventually you'll find your way. And I can almost guarantee you that those relatives and those, older people, once they actually, you can tell them, oh yeah, I've been doing this, I got this big bonus doing this, blah blah blah. They'll be like, holy smokes, I didn't even realize people could make this much money doing that. Because I mean, like, you look at modern Twitch streamers, up until maybe like 5 years ago, no one would say that, oh, these people can make like a couple $100,000 a year just playing video games. And that's completely alien to a lot of people that are under like 35 or something like that. But again, technology has just changed so rapidly that nowadays, if you're passionate about something, whatever it is, you can usually make it into a profitable career. And the concept of like a real job is quickly becoming irrelevant. So I would say do the best you can to show people and give them examples and hopefully get them on your side. But sometimes you just have to put your head down and just go all out and believe in yourself. And that's probably going to get you a lot further than, sitting at the table with grandma and arguing back and forth. I would say just focus on getting results, and then those results will probably get them on your side in the long run. So best of luck to you. I know it can be hard to have those conversations. Like I said, I was fortunate enough that my parents kind of always supported me in whatever my decisions were. That I don't have to go to college or something like that. But I know different people's parents and different cultures around the world can be completely different, and it can be a lot more of a hard situation for some people. So I totally have empathy for that. I would say the biggest thing is just have those conversations with them and try and get them on your side. But if not, just buckle down and make yourself successful. Almost use that as fuel to make yourself more successful in the long run. So hopefully that helps you out and clarifies my thoughts on that matter. All right, so the Ice Cold Cookie says, language-wise, is it an advantage to know other languages in the industry? If so, what circumstances are they needed? Another one I wondered is, are there people in the industry who don't play games a lot? I guess no, but it's usual for other jobs, so I might get surprised. All right, Cookie. So language-wise, I mean, knowing another language is only going to benefit you in pretty much all aspects of your life. Here in Montreal, it's a very bilingual city, and coming from Vancouver, I actually took Japanese in high school, but then I didn't use it for multiple years, so that's completely gone out the window. I should have taken French. But Montreal is very bilingual, so as an Anglophone or whatever, I have been able to totally survive and thrive here. As well as when I got here, Ubisoft actually offered lessons in French too, to help you kind of get integrated into the local culture a bit more. But I would say if anything, knowing English will definitely help you the most, because that's almost every studio around the world will have like 80% of their meetings in English, because usually they're pulling international talent from any country around the world, and English is kind of like that universal language that they tend to be able to communicate in. But I mean, it never does hurt you to know the local language. So I would say if you really want to go work in Japan, it could be good to maybe learn a bit of Japanese. But I don't think it will ever be the linchpin that kind of like stops you from getting a job somewhere. All right, Zip Jalapeno here says, what are some of the niche technical jobs involved with art? I hear about them, but I don't know exactly what they are or their use. So a lot of technical jobs, like some of the ones I can think right off the top of my head, would be an effects artist, someone who makes like explosions and works with particles. That is quite a technical job, and it's a very niche kind of thing. Like the amount of really good effects artists out there is a lot less than the average amount of character artists and environment artists. There are also technical artists out there, so that's someone that usually works more on the engine side of things, maybe creating tools to help artists do their job on a daily basis. So like maybe they'll go and they'll create a spline system for roads that can automatically generate the sidewalk and trash cans and stuff all along it. So that would be an example of what a technical artist could do. They might work on tools for, say, 3D Studio Max to make people's lives easier. There is a really wide range of what a technical artist is. Some people really focus on the engine, some people focus on tools, but usually they're on the more the side of things of making an artist's life easier, as well as making overall production more efficient. So if you are into scripting and programming and stuff like that, that can be an advantageous thing on your way to becoming a technical artist. And there is always usually a strong demand for tech art people. There's technical animators, so they might have more of a specialization in stuff like rigging or animated destruction and like Houdini specialists and stuff like that. But there is a wide spectrum of jobs available for people who are really strong in terms of like the technical skills, so like engines or Houdini, or maybe you're able to create scripts and plugins for like Substance and stuff like that. But yeah, so like if you could get really good at a few key programs, you'll probably be leaning more towards the technical side of things. And I find a lot of technical artists, they might start out as an environment artist, but over time they just find themselves creating tools and stuff for people in the studio on the side, and then they kind of like make their way into technical art. I don't think there's a lot of people that really dive into technical art right off the bat. I mean, there's definitely some talented people out there that are probably creating scripts and tools without ever even working in the industry. But in general, my experience is people kind of start in more of an artistic role and then find that they really enjoy the more technical side of things and transition over time into that. So hopefully that helps you out. I would say, yeah, if you want to be more of like on the technical side of things, maybe start going really deep with different features of like Unreal Engine or Unity, and just master as much as you can about that engine, because then when a studio is looking for like an Unreal expert, you'll probably have a lot of really relevant skills to that position, and it'll probably help you get a job as well. All right, so this next question comes from Pawik Dzaik. Sorry if I'm butchering your name. Is it hard to land a job as a character artist? I rarely see offers for junior character artists. Is this because the market is oversaturated with them, or because they are in so much need that they are being searched by recruiters and messaged privately about the job? So I think a lot of character art positions that are posted, they just say either senior character artist or character artist. And I wouldn't really look at it as, oh, there's a junior character art positions posted. I would just apply to general character art postings, but your work is going to have to be a really high quality, pretty much the quality that a senior is producing, because usually the difference between a junior and a senior character artist is maybe their work isn't quite as complex, but the results are very similar, but it's just the time frame that it takes to get there is different. Like a senior will be able to do, 2 to 3 times the work of a junior character artist, but their results should look pretty like evenly because they're going into the same game, right? So the results and the level of quality has to be really, really tight, but it's like you can just take more time to get there. So I would say once you're hitting that level of skill that you can look at like a AAA game and say, yeah, my character looks like as good as like one of the NPCs in the game or something like that, then you're probably on the right track. As to the amount of them versus say like the environment art team, it usually is like a different ratio. There might be like 2 or 3 character artists and then maybe 5, 7, 8 environment artists. But you also have to look at how the industry is changing as games as a service becomes more popular, and there's this big need for a lot more like cosmetic and different character skins and stuff like that. I think there will be more and more character positions opening up just because of the insane level of like demand. Especially you look at like a game like Fortnite and the amount of character customization and stuff that they're producing per season. I would say that their character team has probably ramped up significantly in the last couple of years over at Epic. I'm not sure, but that would just be fielding a guess. But as games as a service becomes more and more popular, I think there will be more positions opening up, maybe even more for junior character artists, because like you can be the person that's creating all the gear and the bags and stuff like that, maybe in the accessories. So I think there will be more opportunity for character artists. So again, if you're really passionate about characters, just stick on that path, keep creating content until your work is matching the level of the studios that you want to work at. And again, the difference really between a junior and a senior or a mid-range character artist is the results should be very similar, but the time frame that it takes to get there and maybe the amount of revisions is probably what is going to differentiate that junior to senior experience level. So this next question comes from Bruno Leon on YouTube. Is it very difficult to get a job in the industry abroad without having much experience? And what would you recommend if the industry is very limited in your country? So this kind of ties back into the first question about the whole mobility thing. I think it'll definitely be a lot easier to get a job abroad if you have, first off, a degree, simply because a lot of countries, their visa requirements, they require you to have a degree. So it might not be as much of an option for your first job if you're self-taught like me. Like for me, my first job was in Canada and I'm Canadian, so I didn't have to worry about that side of things. But again, like I said, as time progresses and there's more options and opportunities out there for remote work available, just because of the way that the internet's growing, I think it'll become less and less of an issue, and studios are going to just want to hire people that are really, really good. So that's what I would focus on, is just getting as good as possible. And by the time you get there, if you're just starting out as a student now, maybe it'll take you 5 years to get to that like industry ready level of quality if you've never made a character before. So I would say just work on your skills, and then opportunities will probably start to present them to yourselves. And that's if you're working in a country or an area where there's not that much of an industry. I would say, but maybe if you're working in parts of Europe, I know that the EU, you are able to move within it and work in other countries, I believe. So I would say maybe that might have to be your option if you're working somewhere like that. But if you go to, I think, gamedevmap.com, there's a huge amount of studios all around the world that you probably didn't even know existed. So take a look at that. I'll link the description below, and there might actually be local studios near you. But I would say as your skills get better, those kind of barriers will start to disappear, because people are going to want to maybe hire you for freelance work where you can work from home and stuff like that too. But no one's going to want to hire you for freelance work if your portfolio is only so-so, right? Like, they're going to want to trust that you're able to hit that high level of quality, and you have to demonstrate that with your portfolio. But yeah, in terms of working abroad as someone with a little bit less experience, it is going to be harder, but just because a lot of times to get that visa, you need that degree. You also, any work experience helps you get the visa as well. And that's not necessarily the studio wanting it, but more of a requirement of the country that the studio is located in. And it's just kind of like a gatekeeper thing that we're still having to deal with. But that, like I said, over time, that stuff is going to start to probably wear down and disappear as everyone just starts to work online. So that's just my thoughts on it. Maybe I might be completely wrong, and the industry is going to be, you know, people working in studios for the end of time. But I personally think as time goes by, it's going to become less and less of an issue. The next question is kind of on the financial side of things by Luis Miranda. He says, "Hey Tim, thanks for doing this. Could you dedicate a small selection of the Q&A to the business side? I have a few questions. How do you know how much you're worth if you've never worked in the games industry? Let's say you have an entry-level portfolio and you need to know how much to charge. When you work as a freelancer, do you charge by hour, piece, or day? And would you consider it's better to freelance some props to gain experience before applying to a studio for a full-time position? I heard most studios don't hire juniors, and it's more difficult if you live in another country." So that kind of ties into the last question too. So let's go over this. So this first question is, how much do you know you're worth if you've never worked in the game industry? Let's say you have an entry-level portfolio and you need to know how much to charge. So if you go on the website glassdoor.com, you can usually search for, say, the studios in your local area. And a lot of the times there is anonymous salary information that people have left. So it'll say like junior character artist, here's the salary range. As well as you can kind of maybe even ask people on ArtStation, maybe not how much they make, but like, hey, what's the, if you're gonna want to go work in, say, like, I don't know, England or London or something like that. Because the salaries at different parts of the world are obviously gonna be wildly different. Like someone working in Eastern Europe is probably going to make a lot less than someone working in, say, downtown London, just because of the cost of living is so different. But you can message people on ArtStation and be like, hey, what do you think is a good range for starting salary for a junior in this town or city or whatever? But I would say start on Glassdoor. It'll give you a really good initial kind of ballpark figure probably. And then you can just kind of like look at your overall skill set. How do you stack up compared to maybe other people working at that studio? And then just kind of go with your gut on asking what you think that you're actually worth. And a lot of the times that'll be in line with what the kind of starting salary is for that region of the world. So he says also, when you work as a freelancer, do you charge by hour, piece, and day? This is really up to you. I would say maybe avoid the hourly thing, because you might estimate your ability to do a job, and you might quote like, oh, 20 hours, and it's actually going to end up taking you 40 hours to do. But you've already locked in, you know, the price of 20 hours. So I would just usually recommend going by probably a day rate and say, I think this is going to take me 3 days to do. Let's get started on it. And then if it ends up taking you a fourth day, you would charge them for the fourth day. But usually a day rate is going to help you avoid kind of like a nickel and dime mentality. And they're more hiring you as like a consistent source of art rather than being like a piecemeal, because they might only want you to make one piece of art and you're like, okay, I'm going to charge you $200 for this trash can, and then be left out in the cold. But I think if you go for more the day rate kind of thing, you'll start to be like more of an on-call artist for them. And they'll, well, we paid this person for 5 days and they've already completed, you know, another asset. Maybe we can give them another piece of art to do. And that could be a good way to generate revenue in the long run. But like I said, it all comes down to what you're comfortable charging. Maybe you want to go the hourly rate, but in my experience, you probably would want to go with either a day rate, maybe piecemeal, you can quote them. But I would say the biggest thing is, don't try and undercut what you think it's going to, the amount of time and the cost that it's going to take you to make something, because I think a lot of people kind of race to the bottom thinking that they're not going to get freelance work if they charge too much or whatever. But you would actually be really surprised what people are charging for freelance work, because they have to factor in all of their life expenses into those costs as well. And that would be a big piece of advice, is factor in the cost of your PC, your health insurance. You have to take all of those things into account. And that is why I would actually say that a lot of the times juniors freelancing will either really undercut themselves or have a hard time getting these jobs, because they just don't have the experience to negotiate what they're actually worth, and companies are kind of unsure if someone that hasn't ever worked in the industry before or created a high-level piece of game art, they look in your portfolio and they think, oh, okay, you're an okay artist, but can they actually create the level of art that we're requiring in the time frame provided? So if I was going to be hiring a freelance artist, I would have want them to have worked on at least 1 or 2 shipped titles, because I know that the results they're going to deliver are at least going to be somewhat in line with the actual realistic game dev specs. And that just comes down to getting some experience. And now the third part of your question, would you consider it better to freelance for some props to gain experience before applying to a studio for a full-time position? I heard most studios don't hire juniors, and it's more difficult if you live in another country. So again, it's that double-edged sword, is you want to get work, but you don't have any experience. So I think if your work is a really high level, like you have a portfolio full of props that look like senior level, but maybe you haven't worked in the industry before, yeah, you'll probably be able to get some freelance work. And then again, it comes down to charging what you think you're worth. But personally, I think it's probably going to be easier for you in the long run to get freelance work if you have some professional experience, because when people look at your resume, they're going to see you worked on this game, and oh, okay, they obviously know what they're doing. So like if you're freelancing and outsourcing work, you don't want any surprises when that comes in, because that means like having to send, more revisions and stuff like that. So hiring an experienced artist definitely does make that a bit easier. So I know that might sound kind of discouraging as a junior, but like if your work is really high level and you clearly demonstrate, with wireframes and texture breakdowns, and you really break down your work, you'll probably have an easier time of it. But I think the idea that studios don't hire juniors is a complete myth. They just hire juniors that are already hitting a AAA quality bar, and a lot of times people think that they're hitting that bar, but they're not. So I would say just focus on getting your work to a really high level. If you want to go freelance, attempt to get some freelance jobs. But I would say the second you have a couple years of experience at a studio under your belt, getting freelance jobs will be a lot easier, because people will have the confidence in your abilities based on your previous experience on shipping games. So this next question comes from Anamonia on YouTube, and they say, while working in a studio, how quickly do you have to churn out assets or whole environments, and is it a constant sprint or more of a calm jog? If you don't know something, is there time to Google things on the job? Also, how well paid are environment artists? So there's definitely, at a good studio, it's more of like a constant jog, and then with a month or two of like an intense sprint where you're really going hard and trying to get things done in the game. But I would say in most places that I've worked at, it's overall like, yeah, you definitely have time. If you don't know how to do something, Google it, find a tutorial on it, talk with other artists. You're not like sitting there, they're not like sitting there tapping their watch looking at you like with a whip ready to go. No, like you definitely have time. They want to make sure you're comfortable and not as stressed as possible. But again, by the time you get into a studio, you'll probably have developed your skills and abilities to the point where you can create art consistently in a decent time frame. As a junior, like I've said in my past videos, you will have more time, and it's totally expected for you to take some time or extra revisions to get something done. But overall, it's definitely not as stressful as a lot of like those articles on IGN and Kotaku make out, where it's like, oh, I was working 80-hour weeks for 3 years straight. There are some studios out there like that. I've consciously avoided and made a point to not go work at them just because I've read their reputations. Again, Glassdoor.com, you can see their anonymous reviews of a studio. And and your second part of your question, how much do environment artists make? Same thing, you can go on that website and see different studios around the world. I would say environment artists and game artists in general, they can make like a pretty decent income. You're not going to be hitting like a doctor or a lawyer level salary, but again, maybe you enjoy being a game artist more than, would you be happy making $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a year versus like $200,000 a year, but you're miserable? So I would look at it like that. As long as you enjoy what you're doing and you're able to, pay your way through life, like you won't be struggling and eating cans of like dog food. That's for sure. So you'll probably a junior salary to a senior salary, you'll definitely get some decent raises, and with a couple years experience under your belt, you'll be living pretty nicely, depending on where you are in the world. But usually it's proportionate to the cost of living in those areas as well. This next question comes from Mark Webb on YouTube. Mark says, what really stands out on a portfolio when applying for an environment role in a studio? It really depends. Again, is the work relevant to what the studio is working on? Is the work interesting? Like the amount of like dirty back alleys and like dumpsters and trash can models that I've seen in people's portfolio, it kind of all blurs together and doesn't stand out. So I would say pick something super interesting, maybe work from an established concept of something that's like kind of cool and that grabbed your attention on ArtStation, because then you'll have a better chance of breaking through the, like, I think every student does like a grungy dumpster or a garbage can or a mailbox, and like those are props that usually get outsourced. So if you want to be an environment artist, I would say definitely create like at least little dioramas as if you're starting out, and then increase the complexity of your projects as you go along. And hopefully you'll have some full environments in your portfolio as well. But a really high quality diorama can be great. Just make sure it's interesting, because like a lot of the times if it's, you know, something very basic, it's not going to grab people's attention. So I would say as you get better at art, increase the complexity of the things that you're making. So maybe that means having more interesting variety in your materials, make sure the lighting's on point, and make sure the overall quality is really high. But as for the subject matter, I would say avoid like the very basic bland stuff that a lot of people do as their first, you know, here's a car model, here's a gun model, here's a, like I said, a dumpster model, and then here's like an environment with that all kind of composed together in like a really random way. I would say focus on environmental storytelling and stuff like that. That's really going to help bring something new and unique to the environment that you're creating, rather than just, oh, here's like a building with 3 walls and like, you know, some graffiti on the wall. Like that's kind of just a little bit boring. Put your own spin on it. Maybe, you know, it's like a sci-fi takeover, or like maybe something like, you know, Half-Life 2, where they have some really cool alien architecture infused into like modern day stuff. That's always kind of neat to see. But there are no real rules, but I would say just make sure it's interesting and it grabs attention. So that's why I said working from like an established concept that you find on ArtStation, if it got your attention and broke through the noise, chances are if you create that in 3D, you'll have a good opportunity to break through the overall standard glut of like average stuff that students put out usually, and really have like something that stands out and makes you a memorable applicant to a job. This next question is from Steven Serez Smith. Steven asks, I recently came across a prop artist called Ali Rahman. His props are very well made with extreme levels of detail and consideration to each individual prop aesthetic. As an environment artist, I was wondering how important it is to work to this level of quality in our own asset pipelines when considering efficiency both in time and budget. I think it's a great way to learn the tools, but not practical for full scenes, as it requires unique bakes, etc. If you could share your thoughts, that would be great. Awesome, Steven. So yeah, I mean, not every asset when you're working in a game studio is going to be a hero asset taken to that like full high poly model and stuff like that. And figuring out where to save your time is actually a really important skill to demonstrate for environment artists. Like being able to use a lot of, say, like trim sheets and tiling textures for your overall structure, and then having a couple of hero props in your scene where they're needed is a great way to go about it. A lot of the times in environment art, your walls and floors and stuff like that are going to be quite basic models, so you don't really need to spend all that time in there of like modeling in all the tiniest of details, because you have to think of how the scene is going to be seen in context. A lot of prop artists, if they're trying to get a job as maybe a freelance artist or an outsourcer, they really go to an insane level of quality to show that they can focus their time on one asset, and then they can deliver those. Like a prop artist is very different than an environment artist, I would say, because you're focused all your time on one asset for like maybe like a week or two, versus trying to build up an entire environment with like environmental storytelling and interesting stuff going on. So you really need to know where to invest your time, and a lot of the times like that concrete pillar off in the background, you don't need to do a unique sculpt, a unique baked, just because if you did that for every asset, like you said, the time and the budget just wouldn't allow it. So developing that eye for where to focus your time and energy is actually an essential skill if you want to be an environment artist. But yeah, overall, you're not going to be going to hero level quality on, I would say, probably 50 to 60% of the assets. A lot of the times it's like your structural meshes are a combination of tiling textures and trims that look good as a whole. And like I said, it's so important that you focus on the big picture when you're composing your environments, versus a prop artist who can spend all day working on like a gold coin that's going to be, you know, seen up close and an examinable asset, you know, that the character can pick up and you can actually look at and stuff like that. So it's completely different workflows. And if you want to be a prop artist, yeah, absolutely, your portfolio should show that super high level like detailed models on every single asset. But if you're working as an environment artist, make sure the overall image is super high quality, of course. But you're gonna kill yourself if you try and, you know, sit around sculpting every little tile on every unique pillar. Like it's just unfeasible. So knowing where to smartly spend your time and attention is just as important as how good it looks as well in the long run. So this last question comes from Andre Felipe, and it kind of ties into the freelance questions we had in the past. Where can I find outsourcing contracts apart from ArtStation and positions? And when is a good time skill-wise to start taking those up? So like I said, once your skills hit that industry standard level of quality and you can clearly demonstrate that, it's going to be easier for you to get freelance and outsourcing jobs. A lot of the times they're posted, there's this whole section on Polycount for outsourcing and freelance work. You can probably contact people on there and apply for them. But yeah, like I said, to be honest, it's probably going to be easier for you to get freelance work once you have a couple ship titles under your belt, because you're going to be able to bring all of that confidence and experience of working on an actual game in the past to creating assets externally that are ready to plug into people's pipelines. So it's kind of like a chicken before the egg situation, but you can definitely look for smaller freelance contracts, like I said, on maybe ArtStation or Polycount. I don't do a whole lot of freelancing myself, so I know there's sites like Upwork. There's probably like 3D modeling jobs on there. They're probably not going to be the best paying things of all time, but it can get you some experience under your belt. But I'm not super familiar of where freelancers would find jobs. I would say maybe look on ArtStation, find someone that says, freelancer or freelance prop artist, and send them a message. Be like, hey, I'm thinking about getting into freelancing as well. Do you have any advice? Where do you look for jobs? And some people, they'll probably have like that protective mentality of like, less work for me. But a lot of people will probably straight up tell you, oh, here's a website where you can bid on jobs and stuff like that. So I would say, again, it's all about communication. So once your skills get to like an industry standard level of quality, start reaching out to people. I know if you've worked in the industry at studios, it's probably going to be a lot easier to get those freelance contracts because you'll have contacts at other studios. So say you decide to go freelance and you've worked at 5 different studios in the past, you can probably reach out to all those producers and be like, hey, I'm going freelance, by the way. Are you guys looking for an external art outsourcer? And they might have some work for you. And by using that networking and those contacts from your past, you'll probably be able to get work and make a decent living. But I would say if you can get some studio experience first, because it's going to make you more valuable and have a bigger, deeper understanding of the overall game art production pipeline, and you're going to be able to create assets and content that don't require as many revisions, which makes you more attractive as an outsourcing partner. Wow, that was an intense one. I think we went pretty deep on a lot of those answers, and hopefully it helped a lot of you out, as well as people just finding this video in the future. Maybe it'll hopefully answer some questions that you had, but were always too afraid to ask, or didn't even think about to ask. So we're gonna keep this series continuing. Next time I want to do one of these Q&A videos, I'll send out a tweet and also put a post on the community section of the YouTube channel, and you guys can throw in all your questions and answers, and we'll kind of pick a theme for the episode and run with that. So as always, make sure you hit the like button, make sure you're subscribed, leave a comment below saying what the biggest hard-hitting point is that you learned from the video. And I definitely have another tutorial coming out probably end of this week, early next week. I'm just getting to start to work on that right now, so hopefully you guys will really enjoy that. So stay tuned, and thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video.